Distinguished Mr. President, Honorable Lennart Meri's family, Excellencies, dear friends. When I was a child, I was fascinated by a kaleidoscope. Every time I shook it, a new pattern of forms and colors emerged. There was always order in each pattern, but the kaleidoscope provided an endless number of possible alternative orders, each with their own organizing logic. Years later, I became a student of world order, and I learned that there are always certain organizing principles that define relations between states and other actors in global politics. These principles change over time, and they don't come out of nowhere. They are shaped by actors, states, organizations, even individuals. Most of the time, the kaleidoscope is rather stable, but usually the lifetime of every individual includes at least one radical breaking point in history, when old order collapses and a new one emerges. Now we are living through such a breaking point. The kaleidoscope is trembling. There are many shakers, and it is not yet clear whose vision will emerge as the new order and what will be left of the old one. 30 years ago, Europe was seen, at least by many Europeans, as a new kind of power that was leading the way in building a better world, more open, democratic, and just. President Lennart Meri stated in 1994 that Europe had become the world's engine. Today, I believe we are more humble and on the defensive. Many Europeans have been taken aback when realizing that not everyone shares our vision of world order, not even all our allies, not to speak about adversaries. A major war is raging on the continent for the 4th consecutive year, and we Europeans, together with our allies and partners, have so far failed to give sufficient support to the brave Ukrainians who fight for a just and sustainable peace, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole Europe and beyond. We can and must do more. President Meri cherished Europe, but he also warned the transatlantic community back in 1994 that if countries such as Estonia and Ukraine are left to their own devices and exposed to the potential neo-imperialist appetites of Moscow, the price for it would be too high, even for all Europe to pay. In those times, imperialism as well as geopolitical conflicts were seen as something belonging to the past, not future. Yet here we are today, in a world where geopolitics has come back with a vengeance, and imperialism seems to be on the rise. Europe has yet to prove that it can stand up for itself in this moment of disorder and conflict, defend its values, security, and way of life, and not just shake the kaleidoscope of world order, but also stabilize it and define a new equilibrium that does not allow the forces of darkness and destruction to prevail. There are encouraging signs, and we know that we are not facing this task alone, but with allies and partners across the globe. We shall go forward together, as the motto of this year's conference says. Let me conclude by thanking everyone who has contributed to this year's conference, our partners and sponsors, both in public and private sectors. Good to see so many of you here. And of course, I want to thank all the colleagues at the ICDS, and the biggest thank you goes to the director of Lennart Meri Conference, Helga Kalm. I wish you all very inspiring discussions. And I will now hand over to Amy Mackinnon, who will moderate the first panel. Please.
perfect. You want to be?
Well, thank you for that very thought-provoking and relevant introduction. It's now my great honor to moderate our first conversation of the full forum of the conference with an incredibly distinguished panel who I know need little introduction for those of you in the room today. We have Ambassador Whitaker. Congratulations on your recent confirmation. We have Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Radmila Shekerinska. We have our gracious host, the Foreign Minister of Estonia, Margus Tsahkna, and Radek Sikorski, the Foreign Minister of Poland. So just a quick run of show so you know how the next hour is going to unfold. I'm going to turn it over to our guests to give a few minutes of opening remarks. I then get about 25 minutes to grill them with my own questions, and there is lots to discuss in the walk up to the Hague summit. And then I will invite you all to ask your questions to our panel as well. So please be thinking as we're talking on what you would like to put to them. So I would like to start with Deputy Secretary General, if you could give a few remarks on your expectations and your aspirations for this upcoming summit next month.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the organizers for inviting us. We came here directly from our informal foreign ministerial in Antalya. I'm seeing several of the participants here. And the plan for Antalya and the plan for the Hague summit is more or less what you have here on the wall behind us. We do need to go forward, and we do need to do it together. I think that everyone who was at the meeting in Antalya moved forward with this joint sense of purpose. We do need a NATO summit that will be successful, but of course we need to define what constitutes success. And the Secretary General was very clear since the beginning that he really wants to focus on the priorities. And as he said, he wants to see at the NATO summit a stronger, fairer, and more lethal alliance. And he was very explicit what this entails. So basically, we will have to deal with questions such as what, when, and also how much. I do expect that at the Defense Ministerial early June, we will have the endorsement of all allies on a very ambitious set of capability targets. Allies have already basically given a green light when it comes to the capability targets that they have been subscribed to. It is a set of capability targets that are 30% more ambitious than the last ones. It's a very ambitious, but it is a necessary target. And this is what we say when we claim that NATO needs to be stronger. The capability targets reflect the plans that were previously agreed with allies. So basically, we know what's the threat, and we know how to deal with the threat. We have to support that goal with accepting these capability targets. We have already mentioned the fact that the alliance needs to be fairer, and it is not only because of the US call for a more balanced approach. Many people have said that security cannot be a service that we expect to be provided by the US, and this is why European allies and Canada have already worked harder, contributed more, and have taken part of this burden. But the trend has to continue. And this is what we mean by having an alliance that will be fairer. And then when we say the alliance needs to be a lethal force, that's because we strongly believe that although the alliance is a defensive one, we know that weakness invites attack, while strength deters aggression, and that we can really prevent war by preparing better for this. This is why investment in our military strength, in our militaries, is essential, and we can do this only if we increase defense spending. So this is more or less the triad of the things that we want to achieve at the summit. Of course, we are still not there, otherwise the summit would take place tomorrow, but I think that what was clear in Antalya was that allies agree that there is a clear and present danger, and that the threat is real, it's existential, and therefore our words have to be decisive and they have to be matched with an equally strong action. So we look forward to The Hague with really an ambitious agenda, but our focus will remain even after the summit, because it won't be just the new pledge that we make on significantly increased defense spending. It will be allies moving forward. We have had a pledge back in 2014, it was 2%. Only few allies few years ago were there, but as we move towards the summit, it becomes clear that probably, hopefully, all will be there and all will commit to increase defense spending, not because we just want to spend more for defense, but because we feel that defense and security have become threatened again. So forward, but also together.
Thank you for setting the scene for us. Minister Sikorski, what are you looking ahead to with the Hague Summit?
Well, yesterday, as I was listening to speeches by my colleagues, the NATO foreign ministers, I had a rather pleasant feeling of seeing the alliance in action and getting serious. And I was reminded by what Admiral Yamamoto was supposed to have said after he bombed Pearl Harbor. We've woken a giant. And I think Putin has woken a giant. He has yet no idea what we are how costly this is going to be. We are a $19 trillion economy, with just the European Union. Since President Trump first came to power, we have already doubled our defense spending. We're going to go for more. We are at 2%, 3.5% on hard defense will be the new target, and 1.5% for civil defense, cyber defense, the softer stuff. When we've done it, we will be dwarfing Russia. Russia is a $2 trillion economy. We are spending, as Europe, without the US, we are spending 2.5 times more than Russia on peace footing than Russia is spending on war footing. All it takes is to spend the money better, also on the basis of lessons learned from Ukraine, and then have the will to gel it into a fighting force. So I think we should be grateful to the leadership of the United States for telling us like it is. NATO was founded to deter Russia. Then we had a 25-year period in which we all tried to Europeanize Russia. I profoundly disagree with those who say we humiliated Russia. No, billions were spent on economic assistance. Russia was invited to join the G7. Russia was invited to join the Council of Europe, various institutions, Council of Baltic Sea States. And it was Russia that decided to throw all that away and try to rebuild the empire. And this we will not permit Russia to do. Ukraine has given us invaluable time to get organized. And I actually think that that by the end of the decade, we will be stronger. Russia will have a terrible hangover after this war, and then maybe we'll become more reasonable again.
Ambassador Whitaker, please.
Well, I was worried you were going to ask me a question like you did the minister, and I was going to then have to pick a fight with you, and I'm already, sort of making sure that I'm not picking a fight with 31 other allies. So I'm glad that you just threw it to me, because I do have some opening remarks that I'd like to, kind of share sort of some thoughts from the top, maybe help, sort of inform everyone in this distinguished group and in this panel, sort of where myself and where President Trump in the United States is coming from. First and foremost, obviously, I'm honored to be here today. This is not where, when President Trump won this last presidential election, I expected to find myself. With my background and experience, maybe I thought I was on a different path or trajectory, but I'm actually very humbled and excited to be in this role at this moment in time. I think this is a tremendous opportunity to build this alliance stronger than it's ever been, and to work collaboratively with our allies. And so, it's been fantastic. And, obviously everyone in this room plays a critical role in fostering transatlantic cooperation and strengthening NATO and the alliance as leaders in industry, government, and civil society. You are fundamental to strengthening global security and stability and enhancing and improving the rules-based system that we have for the last 80 years become so accustomed to. You know, the reason we're at this conference is President Lennart Meri, in whose name, you know, we are gathered, had a real reputation as a truth teller. And, you know, he once said, this is, again, my staff says he said this, I should have researched it myself. These are always dangerous to quote people. But he said, it is very easy to tell a story that pleases everyone. It is much more difficult to tell a story that is the truth. And so in that spirit, you know, I'm going to shoot with you straight. I'm going to be very honest with you. As I mentioned before, NATO is the strongest alliance in world history. But more has to be done. President Trump sent me to Brussels to ensure that NATO is ready for today's challenges. And that means that our allies have sufficient modern military capabilities at a high level of readiness to deliver credible deterrence and defense. The United States has long been a primary provider of conventional security to Europe, but as Secretary Rubio said, Europeans must now step up to secure peace on the continent. We still have a ways to go, but we are making dramatic progress. As the Deputy Secretary just mentioned, over the last 2 days in Turkey, you know, the focus of our conversation was NATO's pathway to the 5% that the minister just mentioned. And this is the single most important step the alliance can take to ensure that it is strong and fully capable in meeting the security challenges that we face now in this 21st century. I want to recognize Estonia as a model ally and a friend of the United States. They are serious about meeting President Trump's call for NATO allies to contribute more to their own defense. This year, Estonia is spending 3.7% approximately, depending on how you calculate that, and they're committed to spend over 5% starting next year. And just 2 weeks ago, Estonia took delivery of 6 HIMARS launchers, one of the most significant capability upgrades in Estonian military history, allowing commanders to influence the deep fight and strike targets hundreds of kilometers away. That makes NATO stronger. Poland as well is, you know, going to spend 5% of its GDP on defense this year. And Latvia and Lithuania have publicly announced their commitments to reach at least 5% defense spending in the coming years. In addition to these countries, which are leading our alliance in preparing to address the threats of the future, others, including Sweden, have announced plans to go to 3% or more of core defense spending. This is a step in the right direction for the alliance. It is progress, and you know I'm going to say it's not enough to secure peace through strength. Increased defense spending must come with increased defense industrial production, both in the United States, but most importantly, here in Europe. This is why we must work with allies and the private sector to strengthen and expand the transatlantic industrial base, delivering more ammunition, more equipment, and more war-fighting capabilities to allied arsenals. The summit in June will be critical, as the Deputy Secretary General just said, in a moment to solidify our defense investment gains and agree to the new defense investment plan. If you have better ideas of what to call it, some people want to call it the DIP, the HIP, the Hague investment plan, the Hague defense commitment. I like that a lot. The HDC. Try those on for size. Let me know what you think. That's going to be a ministerial level decision, not done at the NAC. The United States is looking forward to affirming this commitment, which will help ensure NATO has the personnel and equipment it needs to deter and defend alliance territory for generations to come. To keep our people safe in a more dangerous and competitive world, NATO allies need to increase their defense spending to face the threats that all allies have identified and articulated together. And you have an important role to play in increasing support across our societies and our populations. This also requires us collectively to strengthen our defense industrial base to produce the capabilities that increased spending will require. And we do that. As we do that, it's important that we do not take a restrictive approach. This is, I'll footnote this. This is my homage to the European Union. You may know that there's some discussions going on. Restrictions make supply chains more fragile by limiting options and discouraging or preventing EU and non-EU industry actors from building partnerships that will make them stronger and more effective in the long run. Restrictions not only hurt our industry's ability to compete in the worldwide market, but also undermine NATO interoperability, slow Europe's rearming, raise costs, and stifle innovation. Next month in The Hague, leaders will gather to commit to making our alliance more effective at facing 21st century threats. We cannot continue to look back at the great things we've accomplished. We must look forward and make sure we are cementing the foundations of our collective defense through committing the necessary funding, developing our defense industrial base, and strengthening our infrastructure and hybrid and cybersecurity defenses. In closing, we are making progress, but we are not there yet. Working together, we can ensure peace through strength. Today I was supposed to go watch the joint exercise as part of the Hedgehog exercise. Unfortunately, because of weather, we had to go see the Baltic Air Policing Portuguese Air Force contingent, and then we talked to the Estonian Navy about kind of what's happening right now in the Baltic Sea. And I just think it reminded me of we're here in Estonia, and it's a perfect example. The defense forces that are integrating and operating in a joint manner with their new HIMARS, thanks to U.S. Army's Task Force Victory. They've trained the Estonian allies on the U.S. HIMARS since 2022. The cooperation makes America, the entire alliance, stronger and safer, and we are proud to be a part of it. The United States remains fully committed to NATO. This is my first trip where I wasn't required to go to a ministerial. I'm in Estonia. Soon I will be in Poland. I am going to visit our allies that are doing what they're being asked to do, and our great friends and great allies and great partners. We are as active now as we've ever been, and you will see firsthand as we lead allies toward historic defense investment commitments at the Hague Summit. Thank you all, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador. And last but certainly not least, Minister Tsahkna.
Thank you, and thank you, Ambassador, for quoting the Lennart Meri. And I'm a very bad diplomat. I'm only talking about truth. I'm not trying to please anyone, but on the way to The Hague, let's start from the reality, what is happening right now. And I think that we just came from Turkey yesterday, but also there was a meeting which could have been the opportunity for President Putin to really start the process for peace. I'm meaning the just and lasting peace, but actually he didn't use it. And instead of that, he just gave the slap in the face for all of us, starting from President Zelensky, President Trump, and all the other Western part of the world, sending the delegation on the level that the guy who's leading this delegation actually is ultra-nationalist, not political level, a very high guy, just to put the ultimatums on the table. Actually, they did 22 already. So I think that Putin missed this opportunity, and for everybody in the world now, must be clear that who is an aggressor and who wants the peace. And this is a good point. Why I'm talking about this right now, on the topic that the way to The Hague, is that actually this is declaring what we need to do. Russia is an aggressive country and will be an aggressive country for the future as well, and this is something we need to focus as well and say loudly out as a NATO, that Russia will remain a Russian country. The second thing is that Estonia has a problem. We need to cut our plans for defense spendings to fit into the NATO new plans, because we are decided 5.4% for the next year. So we need to fit into the 5%, and I mean the real
criticism on our side.
The real spending is not this. Okay, it's a good thing. Be honest, I'm really grateful for President Trump, not only this term. I was the defense minister for the first term as well. And be honest, the Europe and NATO could have done these kind of decisions, what we are doing right now, 10 years ago, when Russia actually started the aggression. We are a bit late, but not too late. It's better to have this kind of decisions right now. And we must focus that even this 3.5%, this will be the real spendings, Not we are going to hide some member states behind this 1.5%. We can calculate everything in. So let's focus on the real spendings. And why Estonia actually has increased heavily the spendings is not only about the pressure from US side, and actually we totally agree over the years that it has been out from balance, that Europe has been taking the security, military security as granted, as a service, as it was said, from US. But actually 2 years ago in Vilnius summit, we agreed regional defense plans. All of us, we agreed them. I don't know how many politicians actually in NATO are thinking what does it mean? It's a totally different position and ideology behind that, because we don't let Russia into our territories. So we need new level of capabilities. And that's the reason why I decided to increase heavily and rapidly as well our defense spendings, because we need stuff, we need capabilities, as HIMARS is, but new level as well, because Ukraine, be honest, is the real driver of the defense industry on a totally new level. And this is something what we need. And then I don't want to follow this kind of debates whether we should spend all the money in Europe or not. We need to get stuff from US, from South Korea, from Turkey, and whatever, because we are not competing with the figures to please whoever. We really need to get these capabilities as soon as possible, and it's not only our concern, it's a NATO concern. So let's focus on that. The second thing is about Ukraine. Ukraine is everywhere, and the NATO summit without Zelensky is not a summit. Really, we need to ask Zelensky to participate. Otherwise, we are not going to focus on what we are going to decide about the pledge, but we are going to, we need to explain that why Zelensky is not there. So Ukraine is part of Europe. Ukraine is part of our interest, because they are not only fighting for their own and for us, but instead of us, be honest. I mentioned you as well at the plane yesterday that we saw 120,000 troops the other side of the border when I was defense minister 2016-17, ready to go, and no one was concerned. These troops are now gone, they're dead, literally, in Ukraine. And this is why I'm saying that there's as well that Ukraine is fighting instead of us. And the final thing is that there's an elephant in the middle of the room. I told about this yesterday, it's the NATO meeting, but be honest, once the peace is coming, we need to push heavily Putin, and I'm very grateful that Senator Graham was as well in Turkey just a day ago, and as well Europe is doing its part about the sanctions, but be honest, this US sanction package in Senate is a really strong thing, and also it will hit some European friends who are since now making business with Russia. These secondary sanctions are very important. But what I want to say is the security guarantees. We have discussion here, I know in Poland and Finland and many other countries as well, but we must prepare that we, as Europeans, we put the skin in the game if we are going to secure the Ukraine peace, if it once comes. And we have made a decision a couple of weeks ago as Estonia that even we are the bordering country, a small country of Russia, we will participate in this security guarantees militarily, we did large scale. And this is something not only symbolic, it's real stuff, but we need to understand that we need to put the skin in the game. And finally, I'm saying again and everywhere publicly that my thinking is that the best security guarantee in real life for Europe, not for Ukraine only, for Europe and for NATO as well, is actually the full membership of NATO for Ukraine in the future, really. Let's think about it. It's the most efficient way. But we are not there yet, but we need to be ready and put the skin in the game and take responsibilities, and then US as well will come together with us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I want to stay with you, actually, Minister Tsahkna, but I can run on the spot if you want to have some water to catch your breath after those remarks. I want to, you've all outlined the run-up to the Hague summit, your aspirations for that. I want to cast our minds back to the Washington summit last year, just to kind of set the scene a little bit more about where things were. Ukraine was obviously top of the agenda on that summit, and one of the outcomes in the communique was the declaration by allies that Ukraine's path to membership was irreversible. How highly can we expect Ukraine and the war to feature on the agenda in the Hague summit this year? And what, if any, kind of language do you think we will see about Ukraine's eventual membership or potential membership?
I'm very realistic, and I think that this is not the topic right now in the meaning of the situation in real life. We have a war, and we have, as I studied my speech or intervention, is that we need to be facing that what is the real situation. And the situation is that Putin doesn't want to have any kind of peace. And we are not talking about a military conflict in Ukraine. We are talking about the Putin's plan, how to eliminate the root causes. And he permanently says that, even a couple of days ago, that this meeting, whatever is taking place in Turkey, it's not about the ceasefire, it's not about the peace, but it's about the question of how to eliminate the root causes. And for him, the root causes is the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we need to understand that this is the case we need to face. And in light of this idea, of course, it's the best and most efficient way to secure Europe and NATO, and then I think that the entire the continent is the membership of NATO for Ukraine in the future. But now the political conditions as well, the real conditions are not fitting in. So we need to focus, how can we put Putin under pressure? We have several opportunities for that, to work together with US, Europe, and many other countries, as well as seizing the Russian frozen assets and many other things. And at the same time, invest heavily to our own defense spendings. And more practical guarantees, actually, US has signed with Ukraine as well this minerals agreement. I think this is a big thing, really. It's long-term commitment economically as well. It's a security guarantee in the meaning, in the software. But what we need to do, we have all the money in the world. We have as well the Russian frozen assets, 240 billion in Europe. Let's seize them, let's invest to Ukraine. This is the most efficient guarantee to Ukraine defense industry and army and so on. So it gives back us, believe me, 1 million, close to 1 million troops who experience in the long war. This is a security guarantee for us as well, and also we can buy stuff in the future from them. So I think that we don't need to focus about the words, whether the invitation is coming or not. This is not realistic right now, to be honest. But we must be ready for that, and we cannot take down the opportunity for the future for Ukraine to become the member of NATO or the European Union as well.
One quick follow-up on that. One thing that the Russians are insisting on in talks is for any potential future membership of Ukraine in the alliance to be completely ruled out. Do you think that is? How do you feel about that as something that they are trying to put on the table for discussions? Is it something that should be part of the conversation?
It is in principle a question about sovereignty, actually. This is like this. We have no allowance, and as well the right to push Ukraine or whoever in a position that they cannot have this choice in the future to join wherever they want to join. And the other way around, be honest, the gray zones or the neutrality has been always the green light for Russia to be aggressive. The best sign that in Europe we understand is that not only that Finland joined the NATO, but the Swedish people decided to join the NATO after more than 300 years of neutrality. So we need to understand that secure the Europe and also to keep the peace if once it comes is actually to be strong and also to bring in the nations who wants to come in. And one thing lastly, sorry I'm too long, but we have been hesitating after every different revolutions in Ukraine, whether the leadership is turning to Moscow or West part and so on. But now we are sure for the next generations that Ukraine will never turn back to Russia. So they want to come in, that this is our opportunity.
Just on a point of fact, let's remember that at the time of the Anschluss of Crimea, Ukraine was constitutionally a non-bloc country, and yet Putin invaded. So NATO can't have been the reason for the invasion.
Very good point. Thank you for that. Deputy Secretary General, just staying with the NATO summit for another minute, another one of the outcomes of the summit last year was a call for the alliance to develop recommendations on NATO's strategic approach to Russia. This is what was referred to then as the Russia strategy. And that was supposed to be agreed upon and unveiled at the upcoming summit. Where do things stand with the alliance developing a Russia strategy? And how difficult is it, frankly, to get allies on the same page, given some discrepancies among certain members?
Well, as I said previously, Russia has been the clear and present danger that influenced very much behavior, analysis, assessment, and decision-making in the alliance. And this will remain the same. I mean, look at our regional plans. I mean, it is clear that these are regional plans prepared in order to protect allies from this threat. Of course, when we analyze threats, we also mention the threat of terrorism, we mention China and its behavior, but when it comes to our regional plans, the capability targets, they're very much focused there. Regardless of how the war and when the war ends, this danger will remain with us. But as I said, the idea of the Secretary General since the beginning of his mandate was to be really, as he says, laser focused on the priorities. So our focus on this important summit was to come up with words and action. So I don't think that we need to go back and reconsider what was discussed, but actually we need to move forward. And although many people now talk about the defense, the new defense investment pledge, I have more constraints, so I will not go into the numbers because this is an ongoing process between the allies. It is a huge deal. And it is not a done deal because it ain't over till it's over. So it's on the Hague summit that this decision needs to take place. So we have decided that this will be our core business. Our core goal. And instead of a bit widening the scope, we said, no, it's not how we assess the threats, it's actually how we deal with threats that will be the focus of the summit. So I do believe that this kind of action will speak much louder than many words.
And to pick up on something that Minister Tsahkna mentioned, do you expect that the Ukrainian president will be invited to address the summit or to join?
It is because of this focus on defense spending, which have to be agreed by allies, that we are still not finished with all the preparations. So there will be, we didn't touch too much on the other issues that will be organized around the summit. As the Ambassador Whitaker mentioned, we put also a lot of emphasis on defense industry, because all this money will mean nothing unless matched with the appropriate defense industrial base. So we will have a separate forum oriented towards defense industry. And we are thinking in which ways we can engage with partners. So this is still a discussion that we have among allies, but I'm sure that as we move closer to the summit, we will have a clearer idea.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a footnote, because I think you will learn, Ambassador, to appreciate the European Union. You know, I was a Eurosceptic when I lived in Britain, and I believed the British press about the European Union, and then I learned how the EU actually works. And when we are discussing spending, remember that most European countries are maxed out on their credit card. They have debt to GDP ratio of over 100%. The only two large economies that have borrowing power is Germany and Poland. We are at 60. And the European Commission has AAA rating. So when we borrow jointly, we borrow cheaply. And this is the most financially most efficient way for us to invest. So we've spent 500 billion euros on rebuilding from COVID, and we have now are now issuing 150 billion euros of debt for defense. The European Union has also exempted defense spending from normal rules of deficit caps, which can potentially allow member states to spend another 650 billion. And then there is the idea of rearmament bank, where we could actually, EU countries and non-EU countries, all allies, like EBRD, but for defense. And this would not be on our books as debt, which would be the beauty of it. Plus, remember, the EU spending, a lot of it is dual use. When we build bridges and motorways, we are increasing military mobility. You know, the forces that would be unloaded in Rotterdam or Hamburg still need to get to the front line. And the infrastructure spending is something that Europe does very well.
I want to pick.
You haven't convinced me yet, but
No.
I want to pick up on that point, actually, Minister. Obviously, there are great efforts underway within Europe now to both boost its defence spending, but also the defence industrial base. But on the question of managing Europe's strategic affairs, maybe with a reduced US role, or be it through NATO or through the European Union, is Europe ready for that kind of organizational discussion amongst itself?
Well, that's the other thing where we can be helpful to each other. So the US is telling us clearly that for them, China is the main challenge. And, this didn't exist 30 years ago. And that they need to beef up their system of alliances in East Asia, and that we should be capable of deterring Russia. We're not yet. But if it came to blocking Russia's advance in Libya, it's partly our mess, Libya. They already have several air bases. They are trying to get a port. They are moving equipment. There's an air bridge from Syria, as you know. This is our backyard. This is 150 miles from Crete. Do you really want us to call on you forever in emergency of that sort? Or would you prefer us to be able to have a rapid reaction capacity, which should actually become operational next year, to be able to deal with lower order emergencies, or some warlord in the Balkans? You don't call on us to deal with your southern border. We shouldn't call on you to deal with our southern border. There's plenty of room for Europe to deal with that would be helpful to the United States.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think that what's happening, maybe for the first time in this alliance history, is that we are having adult conversations about how to balance this. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are just. I'm very proud of my country. I think we do certain things very well, and I think sometimes, our military leadership throughout history has been pretty extraordinary in the way we train our most senior officers to lead massive formations of troops and integrate all, air and sea and ground forces. But at the same time, I don't think there's any doubt that there are certain capabilities that our European allies can pick up and can have here deployed in Europe, ready if they need it, and can be quickly deployed instead of having to, again, have it in North Carolina and ship it to Germany or wherever it might be needed. So, we're having those conversations, I think, at a very productive level, and I think we have also ensured that as part of our strategic review and how we're deployed worldwide and where we need our assets deployed, I think we have agreed with our NATO allies, really our best friends, to be quite honest with you, that we are going to not allow any security gaps in this alliance. But at the same time, I think Europe is they're saying, we hear you loud and clear. We want to do this in an orderly manner. We're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can. We have these just real world problems with our defense industrial base on both sides of the Atlantic. We're going to fix those. We're going to work very quickly to fix those. And I actually am heartened by the conversations. No one in Europe has yet put their finger in my chest and said, you're wrong and you're stuck with us. I mean, they have said, we want to be a good ally, and we understand what you're saying, and we want to work together. And that's, I think that is where we're at right now. And this Hague defense commitment, I think, is a great next step in this transition. But again, the United States is going to remain in this alliance, and we're going to be a great friend and a great ally.
Thank you, Ambassador. Something we've seen increasing discussion in recent years regarding the alliance's role and questions about what should or should not be its role with regards to the China challenge? That was something that under the Biden administration, they really sought to kind of bring NATO into that conversation. How does the Trump administration see the role of NATO when it comes to China? Do you think there is a role there for the alliance, or should they focus here in on Europe?
I do think there's a role, but at the same time, we need Europe to focus on European deterrence and defense and European capabilities. At the same time, there are some things that we have built within NATO that just make everyone stronger, that are our allies and our allies together. And that is things like defense industrial base. I mean, there's no doubt that Japan and South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, our Indo-Pacific partners, can bring a lot to that table on innovation and on manufacturing. And at the same time, there are NATO allies that have interests in the Pacific. And so we have to balance all of that, and again, have these very serious adult conversations about how we do this together, because that's the whole reason you have allies. I think oftentimes there was a mistake that when somebody from my party or President Trump supporter says America first, that somehow that's a isolationist or an America alone statement. It's not. It just means that every country is going to act in their own interest, and oftentimes the interests are to have strong alliances that make us all stronger. And I think that is where we're trying to get NATO. That's where we're trying to get all of our both bilateral and multilateral alliances. And I actually think we're on a really good path right now with the conversations we're having.
Minister.
Under the current Trump administration, we have not yet had a meeting of an institution that I think you will find very useful. So during the Cold War, there was something called COCOM, the Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Technology Control. Anyway, that was its purpose, that denied the latest technologies to the communist bloc. And we have now, based on that, we have now created something called the EU-US Trade and Technology Council, which has a broader remit. It's not only exports, it's also incoming investments for screening, and also research and industrial standards, because there is abuse in that area too. And my pet idea would be to broaden this to include like-minded allies, such as Britain, Australia, South Korea, Japan, so that we have a united West monitoring these things, so that there is less theft of intellectual property, and so that we keep a technological edge.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think you point out really a trend that's happening, especially with the Chinese-Russian relationship, North Korea having fighters fighting against Ukraine in the West. I really think that we've reached a time where there are two versions of the future of the human race. One is a very dark, authoritarian version, and one is a very, Western, liberal, enlightened, technologically advanced society. And they're in direct competition right now on many levels. And so ways that we can bring together all of our allies to talk about these issues, I think, would be very important to your point.
Deputy Secretary General, as everyone has discussed, the big focus of the upcoming summit is going to be increased defense spending. There have been reports that 3.5% will be the new goal, with an additional 1.5% on defense-related spending. How optimistic are you about getting allies to that 3.5%, given that it's taken so long to get many to 2%? And what tools does the alliance have in its arsenal to nudge people along?
As I mentioned, I have more constraints than the others because I represent 32 allies that have still not made up the decision on the exact numbers, but everyone has been talking about these issues. It's clear that the world of 2% defense spending is gone. And we were late. We should have made this decision much earlier. I do need also to applaud, here we have Estonia and Poland, for really being the trailblazers, and because they could have had you could have had a different behavior. You could have waited for the alliance to make the decision on X% and then start doing it. But you really led by example, and you have made our job much easier, because we could say to other allies, which are less enthusiastic about defense spending, less pressured maybe about defense spending, look, if another country can do it, then this increase is not impossible. It's difficult, it's politically tricky, it can be politically costly, but at the end of the day, without security, everything else disappears. We kept saying that during the Cold War, most of present allies spent more than 3% on defense. So I cannot speculate on the outcome. Based on the discussion so far, I am moderately optimistic. I am cautiously optimistic. Not because we were very convincing or because the US has been just dictating the terms. No, it's because the threat is so evident.
Exactly.
And it unites us in a very, how can I say, organic manner. Mm-hmm. So even the countries that are much further from the border with Russia, even they have seen that the distances are now less relevant than they were. And what we have seen is now the two different theaters that maybe many of us kept separate. I mean, it's the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic. They have become totally intertwined. So what happens on this continent affects our Indo-Pacific partners and vice versa. And this is why also this partnership is becoming, I say, more necessary than before. So the focus will be defense spending. The focus will be really defense industry. Because what everyone agrees is that just spending more is tricky, but not the most difficult part. We have to spend better. We have to spend faster, as you have mentioned. We have to spend together, maybe, in order for this costs to be lower. There were legitimate fears among some allies that as we move now to increase defense spending, the price will just go up. So instead of having less security for more money, we need to have more security with the higher defense spending. And this is why we believe that defense spending should be really transatlantic. It should also involve Indo-Pacific partners, because we want to be efficient with the defense spending, and we will focus really on adding innovation in this. I just visited the Diana Hub here in Tallinn. It's really remarkable how startups, while talking with defense industries and with the military, especially with some Ukrainian colleagues, how they can really upgrade and prepare us for, the potential wars of tomorrow. So, we have to do all these things in a relatively short period of time.
Maybe just adding, this debate, not here, but I mean like amongst the member states in NATO, it is going to be a bit like the competition about the figure of who is putting more. Of course, I'm very happy that Estonia will win, maybe as well Eurovision tomorrow. So I asked already money from our Prime Minister to organize the Eurovision next year here in Estonia. You're all welcome. But the case is that why we're actually doing this? That's the main question. As I said as well before, that why Estonia actually invested exactly like 5.4% is not because of the competition, because actually we have agreed what we are going to do to deterrence first Russia, and also we will be ready if Russia is coming. And we know that Russia will have the capabilities to come again with a full-scale military aggression, not now, but maybe after 3-7 years, we don't know exactly. So that's the reason why we are going to invest. The second thing is that, I'm sorry, I'm European, but actually Putin didn't wake us up as Europe. It was Trump, be honest. I remember exactly, I was in Munich, many of you as well, then the speech, what was held and so on. So we woke up, actually. We actually understood that we need to be more responsible for our defense as well. And this is actually the fact. And the reason is not Trump, but actually Putin. Why we're investing. So my question is even more important, that of course we need to spend more, we need to calculate as well. I heard yesterday that one member state said that they cannot increase heavily because they have pensioners and they have education as well. Sorry, we have as well in Poland as well. But we feel that now this is the time for investments. But the main question is whether we will be able politically actually to decide when the attack is coming to fight back. and whether we are able politically actually to use this power we are going to gather, on military level. And we need to work with our societies as well. Estonia is in a good shape. Actually, we were been under the heavy criticism that why only 5.4? Why not 7%? I know some
Sold.
people.
Oh.
But this is a question as well. We need to deal with our people as well. They could understand that we have a democratic countries readiness to fight back if the momentum is coming. And we, as Poland and Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Romania, Norway, we need to make these kind of decisions together with all the others. And this is the main point, actually, not even the spendings and the competition, like bikini contest that I'm putting 5.4 and you're putting like 5 and you're putting 3. This is actually, we have decided to have the region defense plans, and we must be ready to use these plans in real life. Not only about weapons, but the political will. This is a very important part. And this is, thank you very much, Ambassador, for these words that US will be committed to NATO, because many people in Europe, they have asked the question, because the narrative is a bit different. Thank you.
I'd just like it to be remembered that we've had in Poland a super law that guaranteed the military 2% of GDP for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So even while the US was doing resets, we were spending solid money on defense. And the only thing I regret is that we were told, don't worry about defending territory, Russia is not a threat anymore, don't be hysterical, destroy your tanks, destroy your landmines, destroy your millions of rounds of ammunition, and we did, because it's now going to be only expeditionary warfare. And we are now having to rebuild those capacities at huge expense.
Ambassador Whitaker, there was a report in NBC News last month that the Trump administration is considering withdrawing some of its troops from Europe. Can you give us an update as to what the administration is thinking about these kind of plans?
Yeah. Well, as you would expect, the United States is always looking at their force posture and how we're deployed across the world, and how, most importantly, our capabilities are, and how realistic it is to, if something happens anywhere across the globe, how we move and how quickly we can react when necessary. We have had a really constructive conversations with our NATO allies. We have told them that we're going to continue to communicate. We haven't accomplished it yet. Nothing's been determined. So there's, but as soon as we do, we're going to have those conversations. And that's, in the structure of NATO, I think it is a perfect place to have those conversations. And then we've also, as I think I mentioned before, we have agreed that there will not be any security gaps, that we will make sure we have specific conversations with specific countries on a bilateral, but within the NATO framework, to make sure that European security, as we transition to Europeans taking more responsibility, that we will have that we'll all agree as to how it's going to be done. But make no mistake. This is not something. This is not going to be a decades-long conversation. This is going to be. We're going to probably have. It'll certainly be after the summit, but sometime later in the year, we will start having those conversations. And all our allies are ready to do it. No one is suggesting that we shouldn't be able to look at force posture and how we're deployed. And so we'll just keep working on that together with our allies until everyone's comfortable with sort of what and how we're going to accomplish that.
Maybe just, if I may, Ambassador, just to add this conversation, I totally agree with you, and actually, maybe I'm not the most popular person in Estonia in the case, but I think that it's a good timing as well to review actually the posture of the troops in Europe, in the meaning that many of these kind of decisions has made during the Cold War, and now we have a totally new situation. We have totally new alliance in the meaning of the membership of NATO as well. We have a the Ukraine case and so on. And but one thing, I'm just giving you arguments as well, if you are in favor of that, to keep the troops in the region. That, be honest, the U.S. troops in the region, the Baltics and also Poland, they are guaranteeing the peace as a deterrence as well. And of course, it's a real power together with the allies. And the second thing is I know that Estonia is the most efficient governance in the world, and I'm really will be very useful to share our experiences how to run the government most efficiently in the future. But one suggestion is that actually it is much more cheaper to keep your troops in Baltics than in US. because we really support that. And also one more thing is that actually to exercise, to have real environment for real exercise together with other troops. It's a politics, it's Poland. We don't need to call this agency, to ask allowance to cut the tree or whatever. So this is real stuff here. Yeah. So there are some arguments about.
Yep. No, thank you. And that message has been loud and clear from my earlier meeting today with your defense minister as well. I'm told that though scheduling, nighttime live fire activities, maybe you might not want to do those in the summer because it never really.
But we have long winters as well.
Right.
So thank you very much.
I can see some hands going up. I think you're all eager to ask questions. So I may turn our panel over to the audience now. Ed Luce, you were quick off the draw with your hand earlier. If we can get you a microphone, please.
Hello. Question to the three representatives of member states of NATO, and it's back to the Zelensky question in The Hague. Do any of you three have reservations about inviting President Zelensky to the summit in The Hague? And just a small question to Ambassador Whitaker. What are American plans for moving from 3.4% to 5%, which is the self-proclaimed goal which the United States would like to see its NATO allies meet in terms of defense spending? Because you are currently at 3.4%.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Well, we just, I'll let them answer the Zelensky question. And then it'll come back to me because, at the end of the day, we are an organization that works on unanimity. And I fully expect that Zelensky will be at The Hague. And how does that work? Don't know yet. I mean, we're working through those very specific details. Regarding the United States, we just proposed $1 trillion defense budget. President Trump did, and Congress obviously appropriates that money. And I've often told our allies when they say a question like that is, well, meet us at $1 trillion, and then we'll talk about that. But certainly under the we have looked at and we are having those conversations within the United States government as to how we get to 5%. What's it look like now? Where are we at based on NATO capability targets? Because again, we are an ally. We are a NATO member, and everything we ask our allies to do or support, we're going to do the same thing. And so, I mean, but that's for the United States of America. That's a big lift. And again, as the minister said, we have domestic political considerations too. But I don't think. I wouldn't doubt that President Trump wants to invest heavily in the United States military, in modernization, in warfighting, in lethality, in training, and all the things that are necessary. But I'll turn it over to my friends for any other comments.
About Zelensky, I said that I explained maybe very shortly as well that the reason, of course, maybe these discussions as well amongst allies will be different after today's meeting in Turkey as well, because now it's clear who is who. I mean, about Putin and Zelensky. But the case is that if Zelensky will not be asked to join us, then instead of communicate our alliance that we are united, US is committed, and also Europe is doing more, and also we're going to invest heavily more. We as the foreign ministers or the prime ministers or presidents, we need to explain why Zelensky was not there. So, as a communication stratcom as well, will be the totally wrong message as well. And practically as well, be honest, we need to be committed to support Ukraine in the long term to ensure our own security in the future.
Well, Zelensky is the commander-in-chief of the largest army in Europe on our side. 110 brigades, which have shown up the Russian army for what it is. Defeated them at sea, stopped them in Donbass on land, and giving tit for tat in the air. So, of course, he should be invited, but I have to confess to you, I would also like to see President Putin at The Hague.
he said.
Thanks very much. I'm not actually Ed Luce. That's my brilliant colleague from the FT, and please do buy his book on Speak Brzezinski. It's brilliant. I'm Edward Lucas, and I'm one of the authors of the Rearmament Bank proposal, and thank you for mentioning it. And my question is about the efficiency of defence spending for the three Europeans, that it's not enough to spend more on defence. We mustn't put more money into a broken model. What we're getting at the moment is higher prices, longer lead times, and lots of old staff. What we're failing to do is to get money into the new staff, the staff that's working in Ukraine. There's no loan finance for defence tech in Europe at the moment. This is a huge problem. The bank's part of the answer, but I'd be interested for all three of you what you would suggest to make the efficiency of our defence spending more. And my question for you, Ambassador, is this. For the last 30 plus years, we've had the Americans telling the Europeans, do more. When the Europeans do more, the Americans say, not like that. We've seen it again and again and again. So my question is, are you really ready for a strong, decisive, autonomous Europe that really has its own ideas and its own agendas? Because the big advantage of the way things were was that you paid, but you decided. Now the Europeans are going to decide. Is the United States really ready for that?
Well,
which question are we going to answer first?
I have a few minutes to think about.
I mean, everybody asks a question, then they come right at me. Have you noticed that?
Let's give
dramatic
the ambassador a couple of minutes to think on that one. On the defence technology spending, would any of you like to take that?
Yeah. European Defence Agency has been a disappointment. It spent hundreds of millions of euros, 40-something projects. Not a single one of that kit has yet made to the units. Not a good record. So I see the advantage of the rearmament bank in that it would be governed not by bureaucratic procedures, but by business procedures. That bankers would assess the likelihood of the success of a venture. It would also, for every billion euros that we put in, we could actually leverage 20 billion because of banking rules, and banks and the rearmament bank could force or help to create some of the consortia that are needed for some pieces of kit in a very creative way. Because, as I said before, I would imagine it would be like EBRD, which doesn't have that mission. In other words, it could have shareholders from both the EU and outside the EU, and that there are initial expressions of interest from Britain, from Norway, from Japan, from Korea. So I think it would be a really good complement for the other sources of finance.
If I may, Edward, as well, this is a very good question that, as I mentioned as well, this is not a bikini contest, it's a real stuff. But the case is that we need to understand how Russia is waging the war. And Russia is using the First World War stuff, the Second World War stuff, but also the 21st century stuff. So it's not like this only innovation and not the old stuff in a meaning. So this is a combination. This is exactly what we are looking into that. What can we take from Ukraine experience as well, the technologies, the drones and many other things. And also be honest, I see as well, meeting some industries as well, that there is a concern about Ukraine developments, because some companies, they have invested heavily, like decades, to some kind of developments which are not anymore maybe at the market price and efficiency as well anymore competitive, because they have done something crazy, very cheap. But we need to finally find the ways that how to develop the capabilities which will really work. And that's my concern as well, that we in Europe, we have lots of bureaucracy, even about the old stuff, because we have not harmonized even the ammunition. I'm not talking about the more complicated technological part, and this is a heavy question. And now all these trillions are coming in, and there is a political will to spend it, and we may do as well huge mistakes that we're spending all the money, but actually we're not getting real capabilities which will be useful for the future. And the second thing about this money, is what we are talking about. The pressure from US as well, it's not because of now the lately. Be honest, all different presidents, they have said the same things many years, but just President Trump is more, maybe, sorry to say the word, brutal. And we take him very seriously because Trump is keeping the red lines, using the force as well. But what we have in Europe, there's some, I don't know, smart or stupid person said that the French people, they have like the great ideas, but Germany must pay for that. So, but now we have both. We have great ideas, but we have a German new government who has really made the new decision about the taking out the restrictions for the spendings of defense. So all it together fits well from Estonian perspective, because we would have had this kind of situation like 10 years ago, but we have it now. So Edward, it's the right question, that how can we implement that? How can we think for the new probable military conflict, not based on the Second World War, but what is going to happen in the future, and then take down as well the restrictions and bureaucracy. Thank you.
Ambassador Whitaker, I do want to get to that important question.
No.
About, is the United States ready for Europe that pays more but also decides more?
Well, a couple thoughts. First, I'm a plain-spoken Midwesterner, and so to your question, are we ready? Hell yeah. We are ready for Europe to equalize, and we know exactly what comes with that. And I actually think the NATO structure provides, the perfect place for that Europe stepping into that equalized, equal partner role. Along the second part of your question is also fundamental, and I'm just going to have to disagree with your premise. Is the ambassador's residence for the United States to NATO is Truman Hall, and Harry Truman, give him hell Harry, from Missouri, just south of my home state of Iowa, as the president who set up and worked with our European allies to set up NATO. First Supreme Allied Commander was General Eisenhower, who then became a president. And so it goes back to General Eisenhower when he wanted to pull all U.S. troops and couldn't figure out why we were still in Europe. So it's more than 30 years of a United States desire, and I think to the minister's point is, President Trump has just said enough. This is going to happen. It's going to happen now. It's going to be orderly, but we're not going to have a lot of patience for any more foot dragging in this situation. And again, our European allies, really, they're ready, and they have been ready. And now we just have to work through the practical consequences, and I think we can. And I see those conversations happening every day in Brussels.
And just to add, if this thing is to work, the defense spending pledge should be made, but actually the defense spending should end up with real results. And it will be tricky. Sometimes, most of the attention when we talk to press or representatives, the main attention goes to the defense spending and the target. But then we start talking about some less sexy issues like standardization, and then all attention disappears. But actually, this is part of our core business that we need to support even more, because this is how we help allies go to joint procurements, have more interoperability, have better communication, and have the capabilities that they can sometimes share, they can jointly improve, and they can train together as well. So it's these things, supporting joint procurements, supporting stronger standardization so that we don't end up with, numberless platforms that are very difficult to work together. And this time, it's in preparation of the summit, we also focus very much on the so-called Rapid Adoption Action Plan, where we take advantage of new technologies, but actually introduce them into what we already have and do it in an orderly manner. Because what is clear is that we will need all. We will need an innovation, but we will also need the classical defense capabilities. And this time, when we defined the capability targets, we actually did it differently. So practically allies were given the benefit of being creative. They had a set of effects that they had to achieve, but then if they managed to find more innovative solutions, better, smarter, we won't object. On the contrary, we'll use it as a good example.
But I'd like to make one point, which is high politics, which is this, that the US would like us to spend more, but sometimes we get the impression that the US would like us to spend all of it on American weapons. And it's not how it's going to work. Partly because your companies have order books that are full.
I couldn't agree more with you on this. So I mean, we're aligned,
right?
And we just this is one of the many problems we're going to have to work together to solve.
Good. When you start spending more while keeping the numbers of your troops more or less steady, you have a much bigger budget for procurement. So Poland is spending 52% of its huge defense budget on procurement. We have a budget bigger than Turkey and Spain. And so the size of the pie will more than double for all of us. Mm-hmm. But some of it has to be spent in Europe because we have politics too. Our people will say, sure, buy American where appropriate, but some of it has to be produced in Europe and provide jobs too.
We've got a lot of eager audience questions over here. I did promise Paula that she could ask a question, and then we'll come to you, Jill.
And I'll pass it back to Jill. Okay, thank you. Paula Dobriansky. I have to pick up, Radek, on your point about having Putin come to The Hague. So what?
To a different building, though.
All right. Well,
basement, maybe.
This is the answer to the next question, to my question. What about this idea about the revival of the Russia-NATO Council? What is your view on that? What are the views of the panelists on that question?
Can I just intervene and ask you all to be succinct as possible, because we have a lot of questions and we've got 10 minutes left.
Not now.
Great.
The answer, there are no conditions, Let's learn something from the past. We really tried. And what is the result? So Russia is and will remain the threat and aggressive country. So we need to deal with this elimination of the core reasons, not Putin, but we. And we cannot do it in the Council of NATO with Russia. So, sorry.
The NATO-Russia Council was an institutional in times of peace, and it limited the presence of Allied troops on flank countries' territories because their threat perception was lower. Russia has dramatically increased perception of threat, lower capability, but much worse intentions. And as long as Vladimir Putin is president of Russia, we cannot trust that country. He said, these are not my troops in Crimea. He said, absolutely, I have no intention of invading Ukraine. He broke the Budapest Memorandum. He broke the border treaty that he has with Ukraine. So as long as Vladimir Putin is in charge of Russia, we should be on much higher alert than we were before the Ukraine war.
Ambassador.
I think what this comes out of is an alleged document that has been reported that leaked out, it's potentially a leak. I really don't, I'm not going to comment about that, but I mean, even if you believe the reports on their face, there was a bunch of conditions before that would ever happen, especially peace and a Russia that follows a rules-based system. So I think we need to focus on ending this war, ending the killing, and and then making sure that peace endures. And so anything kind of that is so far off and just so theoretical right now that it's hard to even kind of comprehend it.
Deputy Secretary,
I cannot say much more than this. Basically, when peace happens, when it happens. We will not go back to business as usual, because as we say, we spend a lot because the threat is there. But it is true to say that this format was a result of a completely different world, different relationships, and our focus now is really to support the peace efforts. We have appreciated very much that President Trump really broke the deadlock. We try to be helpful also by supporting Ukraine like we did since the beginning. NATO allies were the strongest military supporters to Ukraine. Even in the first quarter, the military support to Ukraine by NATO allies exceeded the announcements. The commitments are much higher, more than 20 billion. But we hope and we count on this process first coming to an end.
Thank you. Jill, please.
Jill Doherty, excuse me, Georgetown University. Another question from Ambassador Whitaker, please. Minister Sikorski mentioned China as a challenge. We just heard the word threat. And could you define how the United States sees Russia as a threat, and also Russia and its friends, which of course are China and Iran? Thank you.
I say this a lot, and so obviously, and if you watched my confirmation hearing, it is very simply Russia is the greatest threat to the Euro-Atlantic alliance. However, to the United States of America, our greatest strategic threat over the next century is going to be China, and how we compete with China at all levels. And we, I think, have done a pretty good job over the last 4, 5, 6 years, convincing our NATO allies that China is a threat to them as well, and they have the same challenges and similar challenges, especially economically, the way that China competes. I'm very concerned, and I mentioned it earlier about the no limits friendship of Russia and China. I think that is a real strategic challenge to all freedom-loving people around the globe. And Iran, I'm hoping that we can get a nuclear deal done with them sooner rather than later, because I think that a nuclear capable Iran is probably one of the greatest threats, to a lot of our allies and friends. And North Korea, again, another rogue state that seems to be in this. I'm going to quote somebody else, a basket of deplorables. That's probably a terrible thing to call, but a group of people that aren't following the rules-based system, and so I think it's a dangerous world, and it's one of the main reasons that the United States believes that NATO allies should spend 5% on defense and defense-related matters, and that's how I would lay it out, and. At the same time, on all those fronts, Donald Trump is leading the way, trying to bring peace in all of those relationships, whether it's the trade deal that he is negotiating and the agreement that we came to with China on trade, that we were running a $300 billion yearly trade deficit with, whether it's an Iran nuclear deal that I mentioned, or whether it's an end to this Ukraine-Russia war. I mean, all of those things, those conversations weren't happening before Donald Trump was elected, and now they are. And if we can lower the temperature globally, if he can pull any or all of these off, I think we're all going to be safer, and our children are going to be safer. But at the same time, the only reason it happens is because the United States is willing to be strong and have our allies be strong, so that we can be credible and we can secure the peace.
We've got time for one more very quick question. I'm going to go to the middle of the room. To Shane, please. Thank you.
Hi, Shane Harris from The Atlantic. Thanks very much for this discussion. Easy question for the end, Greenland. President Trump said earlier this month in an interview with Meet the Press that he would not rule out military force to acquire Greenland for the United States, which he described as necessary for international security. I'd love the panelists to reflect on that position and what would it mean for the NATO alliance for the United States to use force against a member state. Thank you.
Who wants to take it?
Poland recognizes Greenland as part of the Kingdom of Denmark and makes also absolutely no claims on the island of Bornholm.
Nothing to add. Yeah.
We have discussed with a number of allies. I think that out of the 8 Arctic countries, 7 are NATO allies. We have heard the concerns about Arctic security, and there are a number of initiatives now to discuss the question of Arctic security as important to the transatlantic alliance.
So my friend Ken Howery is going to be the ambassador to Denmark, and he is going to be, obviously have an important assignment in making sure that Denmark secures Greenland and its, and what the the North American continent needs, and what the United States needs on that front. The President Trump, this is the problem with the media and asking these types of questions is that quote is not exactly what he said. He was asked a specific question, he answered with a different answer. So I would invite you to go back and actually see sort of his answer to and what the question was. Yeah, I know, and again, President Trump speaks the best. He is you don't have to ask me what he thinks because he tells you what he thinks. And me commenting on what Donald Trump has said is probably not helpful. The bottom line is that Denmark is a great NATO ally. They are dramatically increasing their spending along with their capability targets, and they are very aware of the security needs of Greenland. And I know that we will all work together to make sure that those security needs are important, because what Radmila says, I think, is the most important thing. And that is, as we look at the high north, and if you look at the globe from the North Pole, you see it as NATO allies and Russia. And Russia is investing a lot in their old Soviet bases in the Arctic. The Chinese are very interested in exploiting the minerals and the what's under that ocean and going to be available if the ice continues to recede, and the potential opening of a Northwest Passage, and all of that that ensures. And so, we're going to have to spend a lot more attention and money on the high north and its security, and it is all NATO territory, as you look at that map.
What has the president told you about his aspirations or his thoughts regarding Greenland? Does this come up in
I'm not going to talk about my private conversations with Donald Trump. His marching orders for me were to go to NATO and dramatically get increased spending from our allies and get an equalization from Europe and Canada. And I think we're on a good path to that. Again, the bilateral relationship with Denmark is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to make sure that NATO is strong, capable, and modern.
Well, with that, we are out of time, but please, a round of applause for our fantastic guest.
If I may, I would like to finish this panel. Thank you very much, and thank you really all. But with a positive note to commending the Putin's path to the Hague, as Radek said. That of course Putin's place in the Hague, but I think that most of you didn't recognize that the 8th of May actually we announced a special tribunal for the aggression crimes about Putin, and this is something very important as well. We're talking about the peace, we're talking about NATO and whatever, but accountability is important. So thank you all for that, because it has been like the hidden agenda, but something did happen. So I do hope that Putin will be in the Hague once, as Radek said. So thank you. Thank you.
And just a quick organizational note, those who've been invited to the presidential dinner, the buses are downstairs waiting for you.